Climate change and disasters. This is an important topic considering the uh, impact that we are seeing already that happening globally. And the critical infrastructure is the essential infrastructure for our human existence and how to make them resilient. So here I will be sharing also on the interventions and strategy regarding the critical infrastructure. India ranks third after the US and China in the number of natural disasters in 1900. And India recorded extreme weather events on 241 of the 273 days from January 1 to September 30, 2022 in this year. According to a new report, these include heat waves, cold waves, cyclones, lightning, heavy rainfall, floods, and landslides. So, the disasters related to climate change are in various forms. And during the period 1995 to 2020, a total of 1058 climate disasters happened. Again, they are relevant to like floods, cyclones, drought, cold waves, and heat waves. But if you see the human life loss due to climate-related disasters, then cyclones account 48% because most of the cities, uh, highly populated cities, are located along the coastal areas, and the impacts felt due to cyclones are the area was also in this highly populated area very high. But again, one more important is heat wave. This is like a silent killer. People during the flood times you can see the water level rising, the damage is happening, and the destruction is physically visible. But heat wave, the person seems to, he might have gone out, he came home, then suddenly there is a sunstroke and a person died, especially old people and the children. It is not visible like the floods. So this is a very, I mean to say, kind of silent killer in the climate change if you see. So 26% is not less. And with the global warming, this number would increase and then 18% due to floods and 8% due to cold waves. So all these are contributing. And here, floods is one of the important considerations in India. And more than 300 floods have been recorded since 1950, killing at least 75,000 people and rendering more than 900 million individuals, include homeless, otherwise affected. So in floods, the loss to property and even to agriculture fields or the infrastructure, it is huge actually. Its predictions, this thing has come down. The human loss has come down, but other losses are huge. So even if you calculate losses due to natural disasters, overall, you see, then US dollars 3,000 billion between 1998 and 2017. For three-quarters of the damage has been caused by climate-related disasters, and the United States suffering the most, followed by China, Japan, and India. This is the global losses uh, in the report UNISDR 2018 it was presented. And these maps are very much important because if you see the flood frequency The areas you could see the northern Gangetic Plain, the West Bengal, or Bihar, or even some of the states like Orissa, northeastern states. Even in the desert also, because the drainage system is not well developed in a desert area, so even with little increase in rainfall, like farmer floods once it happened. So these are visible very much in Karnataka, Kerala, Odisha, etc. And again here drought frequency, if you see, uh, here especially Telangana where here now where I am currently in the state, including Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan. So it was very high. But with climate change, recently the trend is different. Last 2 3 years, we have seen that the rainfall has increased. But it doesn't mean that not only it is not a meteorological or hydrological drought alone that we look at. Even if it rains heavily, then if there is loss of crop or increase in okay. So I need to maybe explaining this. Here in cyclone frequency is happens mostly the number of cyclones and intensity is always higher on the east coast because that is due to Coriolis force or the movement of Earth, rotation of Earth. So now most of the cyclones occur in the Bay of Bengal and they travel overland. So if you see very high means this Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Orissa, West Bengal, these areas we have more cyclones. And also there are depressions happening in the Gujarat and Maharashtra, this area, Arabian Sea. From there also some are coming. It is very rare, but they are occurring nowadays. So intensity and the number of cyclones have increased in climate change. And because most of the important cities, highly populated cities are located in the coastal areas, even the death or destruction or loss damages, everything is very high in this area. But if you see the climatological disasters due to all the factors, uh, say floods, cyclones, or sea level rise, or storm surge, or even heat waves. Like that, if you put all the things together, then these states which are in red color, these are highly vulnerable to climatological disasters. Say like Maharashtra, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, West Bengal, and even Assam. So these states need to be more prepared and need to be alert, and there are so many plans and actions need to be done in these states. Yes. In the Asia Pacific region, for example, the number of natural disasters grew from an average of 11 per country during the 1970s to more than 28 in the 2000s. So this zone is highly vulnerable actually, even by area and the number of countries. All this if you see, they are very high. So these impacts are also very high in this zone. And during 1999-2020, 11 out of 36 states and UTs were infected by cyclone. And here, if you see which are the most impacted disasters, or which are more occurring uh, due to the fact of the flood, 33% are the main cause. Then see heat wave, then cold wave, and drought, and then cyclone. So this is the incidence of the disaster. So here the critical infrastructure resilience cycle. Why this many disaster, otherwise also the critical infrastructure is essential for the human well-being and existence and survival. So I will explain what are the critical infrastructure later, but here in every cycle, if you see resilience cycle, so firstly we have to prevention or preventive mechanism. This is very important in case of resilience. This builds up the resilience. Resilience means not just the physical infrastructure, the community resilience, the social fabric resilience, the biological resilience. I think everything need to cope, even institutional resilience, governance resilience. So many things, even before, after an event, this we have to build up. And then absorption will be there. Then there will be recovery. Then there will be adaptation. So it is a cycle actually. So this is how after every disaster or before disaster preventive mechanism so will happen and how people would cope and how they are able to recover and how they are doing adaptation. So all this cycle part of the resilience cycle. This graph is very critical because this explains everything, including especially resilience. So here, if you see here on the y-axis, maximum level of resilience to improve what we need to do. Then new level of resilience and original level of resilience. Means here the resilience is low, say from green point to the blue point is very improved. Hence increase the resilience of community, systems, infrastructure like that. But here actually the crisis uh, detection, uh, this is crisis preparedness, detection ability, responsiveness, recoverability, adaptability. So this is in the timeline. So from, let us say, from A to B is the point in the timeline. Let us say cyclone is coming. From the satellite imagery, one can predict even from 1 week ahead. So crisis preparedness is one area. Then ultimately our satellites, our meteorological data, everything will help in detection ability. The path of the cyclone is determined and the intensity of the cyclone also we will know. Then exactly it will happen. So if you see the curve, the impact will be high in this zone. At that time, we have to be responsive. And again, in the immediately after this event, we see the resilience, even during or immediately. So then absorption limit and absorption boundary, what are they? This also we'll see in the recoverability. Means immediately once the cyclone passes, then these things will come. Then after that, adaptability. Let us say you have water, it's locked, then how you would plan your next construction activity of your house. That is long-term adaptability. Immediately, let's say drinking water you require, then which water source you would use. So that is the immediate adaptability and food and other things where people would stay. So it's a part of coping and beyond that adaptation. Like that, we'll have different steps. So here, disruptive event is started here. In end of disruptive event, it's the start of recovery process, then end of recovery. So like that, we have different steps and end of adaptation. So this is a kind of uh, technically we see this is a resilient thing. So here resilience of the critical infrastructure element and performance of critical infrastructure element in this time from the beginning and till the end of an disaster event. So this is how we look at here the critical infrastructure. Say I have taken some example like transportation is very critical because the mobility is limited. Airports, roads, railways, waterways, like that many different transportation systems included. The pipe is another new form of transportation people are looking at, like tunnel through which we travel. Then another is the power sector. This is because many things run with this energy and then stronger storms, let us say. Wind is a very big dangerous factor nowadays. Overall, I don't know how the ocean currents are weakened in many ways, but the strength of wind has increased. Maybe tornadoes, typhoon, cyclone, anything. Otherwise, also the wind speeds have increased. So there will be lots of damages with the wind. And this local government strategies to reduce the likelihood and effect of power outages, including hardening distribution system, diversifying production and storage, improving energy efficiency, and emergency planning. Etc. And telecommunications, yes, this is very essential even in the relief of measures or response immediately after a disaster or providing help. All these things, but we have many ways and means. But this, if it gets affected, there will be disruption of many things. But within this framework, there are so many things that are happening. Because communication is not just like earlier the telephone or some kind of, now we have videos, images, text, internet, IT solutions, internet of things, artificial intelligence, big data. So many things are there. So all these things are working now parallelly in every given habitation. And if they get disrupted, so there will be lots of losses. Like in Chennai floods, this Loss of communications is a loss to the economy because many software people are working and serving the uh, project abroad. So there was a standstill. And water supply is very, very critical because drinking water is fundamental. Otherwise, to utility as water to for washing, cleaning, and our own existence. That water, so urban water systems are vulnerable to threats. And dams and reservoirs, there is a breach. So all these things will happen. And wastewater treatment and sanitation systems. So all these, if they get disrupted, and the impact will be high. Health infrastructure is another most important critical infrastructure. I think hospitals are being located everywhere without much planning. Even the private hospitals, even government hospitals. I think government should have a strategy. One is accessibility of these hospitals to the community. That is important. But at the same time, where they are located, how resilient they are. Say, if in a coastal area, if it's prone to frequent cyclones, a particular area, we cannot have exposed this critical infrastructure directly in the path of that cyclone or flood area. The transportation also should be very resilient to access this health infrastructure or even the people who are already patients existing there. So High Water is one very good movie that came where it shows the real situations how they are fighting. It is in Poland. The flood happened and how in a particular hospital, especially the patient shifting them to higher floors when it is flooded and how the doctors are taking care. I think it's a very good movie to watch and understand this particular aspect. And here again, for disasters, there are so many uh, things happening. In 1918, an international decade for natural disaster reduction (IDR). Uh, then in 1994, Yokohama Strategy and Plans of Action. Then in 1999, ISDR, International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. And all this came up. And with them, the policies and frameworks and the strategies, everything came up. But what is important is Togo Framework for Action 2005 to 2015, which is very, very important because exactly at the time of Paris Agreement, it ended. But from there, along with Sustainable Development Goals, the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction started. So parallelly, two important things happened. One is on Sustainable Development Goals, another is on Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. So here, ultimately, to bring down the losses, it was the main aim. And we know that since 1992, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is existing, and now we have Paris Agreement, and now COP27 is happening in Egypt. 27 meeting is also happening. But if you see, all the sustainable development goals would be impacted due to this climate change disaster. There, nothing is free. And achieving common global commitment. This is important. So commitments. Then here, Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. It is for all the countries and especially which are highly prone to disasters. Everything should be in place, and the governments need to adopt certain measures. And within climate change also, now uh, loss and damage is one factor which has come into discussion now in this COP27. Again, there will be more intensive work on this. Then sustainable development goals, we know because of corona and global recession and many other factors, I don't think these things are progressing well as of now. But there is a lot that need to be done. Then we have this Paris Agreement on Climate Change 2015 that is also very binding because most of the heads of nations have come together and limiting to 1.5 degrees centigrade global warming on an average is one important strategy. But there also we are failing, and within 6 7 years, average global temperature will be above 1.5. Our limit to 2 degrees they are saying, but by the end of this century, it will be 6 7 degrees increase on an average. So now things are not moving as intended. The United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration began on World Environment Day on 6th June 2021. This is also critical. A new urban agenda was adopted by the United Nations on hosting and all that. So there are so many parallel things are happening. Uh, Here, again, the 7 targets to achieve by 2030, that is under the Sendai Center. One is substantially reduce. What are the things to reduce? Global disaster mortality, the number of deaths, the number of affected people that we have to reduce. Economic loss in relation to GDP, that is huge. So that's why people say if you spend upfront, we invest some, then at least we will save in the future. So that is also not happening in the context of climate change also. Damage to critical infrastructure and the services disruption. So here it comes, our critical infrastructure. My presentation is focused on this now. Then here, substantially increased number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategy by 2020. Then international cooperation to developing countries. It should, because between developed countries, developing countries, very poor countries, or even small island nations, highly vulnerable countries due to climate change, and the countries which are already at loss and damage. So, like Madagascar, now you see there would be starvation deaths. So that's now happening already. Availability and access to early warning systems and PRR information. This is very critical. I think the number of sensors we could have afforded or placed to understand what is happening, even in the context of our own health, our own emissions, I think we are miserably failing. There is no management without monitoring. So this we have to improve and increase and then make everybody responsible. Then policies, actions for resilience and reinforce sustainable development goals. Here, especially some of the goals which are relevant are like SDG 1.5, that is the target. Resilience of the poor, this is very critical. Then resilience of agriculture, SDG 2.4, under 2 and 4 target. SDG 11.5, that is sustainable cities and communities, reduce disaster risk and affected people and urban resilience. And climate change, the overall, the 13th goal is very, very important. Within that, resilience to climate change and disaster, 13.1 key. And peace and justice, climate justice is the term we are using. Climate crisis, climate emergency. So whatever terms we use, I think things are not happening. Reduce all forms of violence. So in case of this disasters, violence, especially to the less privileged communities, even gender-wise, many things would happen. So if you see the Paris Agreement and it provides a framework for financial, technical, and capacity building. All the three it provides a framework. Uh, Here again, proposed intervention which I have presented. So actually, in this particular situation, to improve the resilience of critical infrastructure, we need, otherwise also we need all the 4 things, like a tetrahedron, which is interlinked actually. And let us say facilitation. Here, advocacy and partnership is very critical among all the stakeholders, institutions, government, like that. Then we need to act now. This is what not happening. Thinking is happening, planning is happening. Now we have more science to tell what is going to happen, but we are not acting. So this is the thing which is lacking everywhere. And capacity development, technical support and capacity development is very critical. And let us say in PDM mechanism, there is technology transfer. And now we have many things which are in place which we could adopt. And research and knowledge management. This is very critical. Knowledge sharing is important, and knowledge, right knowledge, synthesis, or even using the technology. So all these things need to happen, and there should be coordination among knowledge management institutions or knowledge creators. This is also very critical. Uh, Then governance and policy, our system governance, leadership, political will and change. See, this is what lacking globally now. The countries say, USA, there is more research happening on climate change, but the leadership denied climate denial change denial were even from media. I think at least now they should understand the importance now when you are already drowned and the global warming is visible and you are having losses, damages. Now at least we need to change. The political will should be there and we should strive for the change. Then integration of disaster and climate resilience concepts. This is also critical. Complaints and regulatory approaches for disaster resilient infrastructure is required. Preparation of national critical infrastructure resilient action plans and budgetary allocations is also required. Then risk identification and estimation. Identification of natural hazards like hydrometeorological, geological data. Of course, the geological is not directly relevant to climate change, but sometimes they get aggravated like multiple disasters. So, and design resilience plans also. National risk and resilience assessment across geographies. Here, tools, methods, historic data, like data poor countries are there, data poor regions are there, and reliability of data, monitoring and management of data, big data management, and scenarios using models. This also we have to create. See, many government policies are just few years only, short-sighted. 5 years because election to election, I will have my plan. No, we should have long-term vision for a country or region and understand the climate change models are existing. We have supercomputers, we have simulation, we have 3D models. We have so much information now. But those things need to be generated, and whether this government or that government or this leader or that leader, they have to respect the science. Then only things would happen. Otherwise, nothing would move. And this spatial temporal remote sensing, GIS images, the LIDAR survey, aerial photography, drones, high tunes, other latest survey methods are available. Yes, we could use all these in case of any disaster, right from planning to preparedness to post-disaster and even adaptation and even mitigation. Also, we can work. Then sensors are available. Even we have IP cameras, open source hardware and software, and internet is very cheap. So I think there are various ways and means. Even without human intervention, also we can get data even from the worst impacted area or most hazardous areas. Also we can get, and most reliable data we can get now because human people may not be so systematic in collecting data, but systems can collect. And standards and certification, this is very critical. See, already in every country we have certain laws, rules, regulations, and standards. And even professional certificate courses are there, capacity building we can do. And compliance of country-specific standards and codes like building codes and bridge codes, road laying road codes. Many standard codes are there, and also need to improve these codes and also understand the like standard frameworks and other things are global standards also we have to understand and then adopt and facilitating improvement in the country specific standards and specifications as per the scientific standard. This adoption can also happen if you think that this is disaster. In spite of those standards, will not help us, then you improve the standards for your own country. Assessment of the existing infrastructure for resilience to disasters. This is critical. The mapping, GIS, remote sensing, all this play important role. Knowledge transfer and processes for improving the standards and certification. This also cross-learning, exchanging of information, knowledge. So all these things can happen. And one institution is there, actually, like Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, where I am also a technical expert and member. So here standards and certification sources, it could ensure, it could work on this and climate resilience of infrastructure worldwide. And insurance mechanisms based on certification for infrastructure. This is a very big thing actually, insurance, because ultimately in this scenario of disasters, insurance industry is one thing which who have become more alert. I think even for them to take proper decision or compensate this all this mechanism right from certification to standards to the monitoring system, all these are required. So capacity building. So here share scientifically accurate knowledge for building resilience of infrastructure systems. And this is very important and all institutions should work on this. And the capacity development for preparedness and post-disaster reconstruction and awareness and sensitization that is required, training required, exposure, institution building and organization is required, a community-based disaster management. Yes, we need to empower civil defense mechanism. Yes, we have to build that because society or even the common, everybody is responsible in case of disaster. It is not that somebody is going to come and do something. And networking and engagement is a continuous process. We have so many international bodies, organizations, and many communities working. So this is also required. Communications need to be improved in capacity building, and we have various mechanisms of communication. So online e-courses, MOOCs, so these are also helping a lot. Then webinars, meetings, seminars, conferences, conventions, all this one could join and get engaged. The knowledge management, publications, and knowledge sharing, generate knowledge products are evidence for policy making process, open data. So all these things are again essential. And in my innovation and emerging technology like big data, we have to use models, predictions, projections, and scenarios, including GCM, downscaling, and all that we can use. Then cloud computing, social networks for disaster prevention and response. Say in Chennai place, from the social media, one could get the sense of which area is highly infected. So this also we can use. Then machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, drones, robotics, GIS, GPS, advanced materials, and geoengineering. This is very critical even as part of climate change and Internet of Things. So like that, many things are available which you could use. Then recovery and reconstruction. This is very, very important after a disaster and rehabilitation of and the reconstruction of critical infrastructure for integrating disaster risk reduction measures into the restoration of physical infrastructure and social systems and build back better within infrastructure recovery and reconstruction. So mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, reconstruction, and prevention, like that. But there are so many actors within this framework, like disaster risk reduction actors, humanitarian actors, sustainable development actors. So all these are important. And finance, yes, this is very, very critical. Where we are lacking now, or even in most of the talks that happen, the discussion ends here. From where do you take? People are interested in short-term gains than long-term investment. I think here risk financing strategies are required, and we require lots of partnerships, co-financing models, legal agreements, public-private partnerships, and CSR frameworks, convergence with other projects or programs, bonds, anticipatory value enhancement. So like that, there are so many ways or mechanisms and means, even green bonds or even disaster-related bonds. Many things are coming up. The models are being tried out. But again, this is very critical. Implementing a comprehensive disaster risk financing framework. So, and government now loss and damage also one issue that came up now in the COP27. Again, uh, it is being considered. We have other institutions like Green Climate Fund and GF, like that. Many funds are all over. But here again, the governments have a role to play. They have their taxation mechanisms and they have their reserve banks and other mechanisms. So national, state, and local budget allocations also required. And you have multilateral agencies globally like World Bank, ADB, European Union, etc. Many would support. As I said, the community-based approaches are very uh, community energy infrastructure, distributed systems like energy mini grids can result in more sustainable. See, when we have centralized grid system, let us say, so we will have so much challenges after the disaster. So decentralized options would help communities, at least in some regions, in major disasters, but because at least some communities will be independent. So community, most of them, at the time of disaster, less people die, but after disaster, post-disaster, many people die because of the vectors or not having proper drinking water or without power, they have many other challenges, sanitation, many challenges will come. So similarly, water infrastructure, many times it is centralized nowadays, it has become fashionable that government is supplying water from centralized systems. So, but we should make community be adaptable even after a disaster, how to survive and how to find their own source of clean water, how to treat their water and use and all. So, community-based intelligence systems for response and recovery. So, these are also required. So, then critical infrastructure resilience strategy strengthen global tender framework implementation. This is important. Then policy advice and advocacy and issues related to critical infrastructure resilience, improve communication and global advocacy, increased understanding and awareness of strategies, issues and trends and their impact on the operating environment of critical infrastructure, conferences, cross-sector interview, workshops, like that. Then prioritize specific measures for critical infrastructure resilience. Then implementation, operationalization, and enforcement of legal and regulatory provisions, compliance and incentives, code, standard certifications, and all that we have to bring in. Sharing guidance and implementation support plans for critical infrastructure resilience, improve decision making. Then respective national legislative and policy priorities for integration of critical infrastructure resilience into national, local, and sectoral development planning and budgeting. And again, coordinate with respective stakeholders for effective preparedness and early warning and response, and build strengthen institutions for resilience, institution building and organization, strengthen organizational performance, designate CI resilience mandates, roles and responsibilities, engage individuals, organizations, public, private sector for CI resilience measures to ensure minimum disaster risk, monitor and review of CI resilience in the member countries, facilitate open knowledge management, create knowledge hub and infrastructure resilience sharing, share CA resilience information for effective decision making. See, I am a very big fan of this open knowledge. Yes, when it is meant for millions of people's welfare or life or livelihood, I think all those knowledge systems should be made open and some international organizations or government could compensate them who have generated such knowledge. So this is very important. Promote a broad stakeholder engagement, participation, and representation of groups from across society, including women, youth, and the impoverished and disabled. Nature-based solutions. This is very, very important. Even all UN, World Bank, or all international organizations, they're telling nature-based solutions is the best option, and ecosystem-based adaptation within that is also important. And environmental protection and strengthening ecosystems is very critical for our own existence. Of course, minimalist way of life, which I always promote, is also very, very important. If you have minimalist way of life, there is less thing that you would lose in case of the disaster. Then facilitate appropriate financing, organize meetings with stakeholders and finance agencies, innovative finance investment mechanisms, both public and private sector for PI resilience measures at all levels, redirection of current investment to minimize existing and potentially the PI risk is also we need to do. So this is my presentation regarding the critical infrastructure resilience from the climate change and disaster. Thank you very much.